Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Hall, and I'm the host of today's webinar. Welcome to IEEE USA's webinar on functioning as a professional consultant. Christine Silva is the presenter, but before I introduce Christine, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping rules. The presenter will do a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please type your questions in the chat pod. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website within a few days. Your phone lines have been muted to avoid background noise during the recording. Christine's practical approach takes people into action. Whether participating in a group event or one-on-one coaching, participants gain skills they can implement immediately. The focus of the development activities is positive action for the sake of right human relations and results for the organization. She is a frequent speaker for the Northern California Human Resources Association, speaking on topics such as candidate selection, results-based performance review, management coaching and mentoring, entitlement attitudes in the workplace, and more. Christy has a bachelor's degree in child development from San Jose State University, a certificate in human resource management from University of California, Santa Cruz. She is trained by the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County, received her coach training with the Coaches Training Institute, and recently graduated from CTI's intensive year-long leadership program. Here is Christine.
Thank you, Helen, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. This webinar is designed to give you some practical skills. So Helen, I appreciate you mentioning the practical part of it. I want to give you some practical skills in what people often refer to as the soft skills. And I think you'll find by the end of this webinar, you'll see why I don't think that there's anything soft about this. I think that some of the actions that we do to be professional consultants can be quite difficult. So I want to give you some help there. It would be great to have your participation along the way. So occasionally I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. So be sure to find your hand-raising function on the technology there, and occasionally I'll have you type an answer into a chat box. I am proud to say that I've had a successful consulting practice since 2005. I'm essentially a management trainer and one-on-one coach, and I also do conflict resolution. I have found it critical in my success to have clients and stakeholders perceive me as being a professional, and that's the goal of this session. You might ask yourself, why bother? Isn't it enough to be an expert? And well, actually, no, it's not. You're an unknown element to your clients, at least initially. When you appear professional, it makes them feel more comfortable and it reduces their pain. It creates confidence that you are a good choice. Some people say how you do anything is how you do everything. So take a look at this. If I'm a consultant who is disorganized, doesn't appear to have a real business, and can't communicate well, why would a client believe me when I say, trust me, I know what I'm doing? So I want to give you some guidance here on 10 qualities that make a professional. And it's not just about putting on a fake image to look good. There's a difference between creating a perception that you are someone who can be trusted and just faking it. Now, my friend Dwayne, that you may hear from in a future webinar, says that, yes, sometimes you do have to fake it till you make it, and as long as you're sincere in your attempts to come across as the professional you are, that will make the difference. So what I'm going to have you do here is I'm going to give you the 10 qualities that define a professional consultant, and I want you to do a self-assessment. Here's the deal with these qualities. When you exhibit them regularly, some of us have to work harder at some of them than others, but when you do them regularly, you come across as being a trustworthy business person, and that's who people want to work with, people who conduct themselves well as being an expert in their field. So I'm going to go to this slide in a moment with the first 5 qualities. I'd like you to grab a piece of paper and get ready to self-assess each quality wherever you are today. So it's a snapshot in time. It's not a final judgment on anybody. I want you to use a high, medium, or low scale. So for each quality, if you exhibit that quality on a regular basis, that's a strength of yours, and you do it regularly, give yourself a high. If the quality you find you exhibit it sometimes in some situations, but not so much in others, then you might give yourself a medium. Sometimes I find that I may be more confident in an area of work than I am in an area of my personal life. So I'm not as consistent there. I give myself a medium. I'm hearing some wicked interference there. Okay, now it's gone. Give yourself a low if the quality is not a strength of yours, or if it's something that you haven't put any effort into building. And again, it's not L for loser. It's L for low. This just isn't a strength of it. Helen, am I the only one who can hear the whistling?
I hear it too.
Okay, now it's gone. All right, let's see if we can go forward here. All right, quality number 1. Get ready to rate yourself. Here's what quality number 1 means. Give yourself a high if you say what you can do. Oh, now it's back. Okay, so it sounds like somebody's probably needs to be muted or something. All right, I'm going to keep going. Give yourself a high on quality number 1 if you say what you can do more than what you can't do. You have an upbeat manner even when things are hard. You show a strong work ethic. And your body language, just even walking around in your skin, you appear receptive. You don't do a bunch of slouching or eye rolling. And on a practical level, when you create a scope of work, it's clear and spells out what's included and not included without apology. So write down your rating now. And we'll go on to quality number 2. Now, when I've got a live group, I'll ask, what's the key word in quality number 2? And actually, both of them can be key words. Give yourself a high if you are willing. If you say to yourself, I can learn for the rest of my life, and I'm open to new ways of doing things. Give yourself a high if you never say, well, it's my way or the highway, or we've tried that before and it doesn't work. These are the kinds of language that take you out of the willingness area. Give yourself a high if you read on a regular basis and engage in continuing education. So give yourself points just for being on this webinar today. Also, when you're curious and you ask constructive questions to learn, that would fit a high. So get your rating down. And quality number 3, flexibility. Give yourself a high if you roll with change and uncertainty. It's everywhere. It's a given, right? So give yourself a high if you can make good decisions, even when you don't have every last detail, even when things aren't completely certain. Give yourself a high if you adapt to change and consider other points of view. And quality number 4. Team player has become kind of a buzzword, and so my mission is to take the buzz out of those buzzwords. Give yourself a high if you work well with others, even the people you don't like. I would have to say that's the biggie for me. We don't have to love each other, and we might even rub each other the wrong way, but the sign of a true professional is they can work with anybody. So give yourself a high if that's you. Give yourself a high if you accept that sometimes you're the outsider on a project team because you don't actually work for the company, but you still work to build working relationships with those people, even if they don't treat you with very much friendliness. Give yourself a high if you avoid being overly revealing with clients and their teams, that you maintain a respectful boundary. You're not cold, but you're also not trying to be everybody's best friend and barf up all your personal details. And then last, give yourself a high if you deal with personality conflicts or business differences constructively. You don't run away from it. You don't beat people over the head. You deal with it well. And we'll go on to quality number 5, initiative. Give yourself a high if you make recommendations and you propose things rather than just vaguely asking, hey, what do you guys think? Now, there's a place for, hey, what do you guys think? But if it's the default, then I would say that isn't going to be effective for you in the long run. Give yourself a high if when you see a problem, you take some kind of action to get a solution going rather than waiting for somebody else to bring it up. And I'm guessing that all of you have some kind of methodology for solving problems in the technical work that you do. So give yourself a high if you bring that mindset of systematic problem solving to all kinds of problems and you get started on a solution. And then last, give yourself a high if you're in a meeting and it comes off topic. I'm sure that happens all the time. Give yourself a high if you get it back on track. You summarize the points, you clarify agreements, even if you're not running the meeting. Get your rating down for initiative. And we'll go on to the second half of this list. Creativity. Now, here's the thing about being creative. A lot of people think it means that you have to be artistic or brilliant. Now, you may be both, but here's the thing about creativity. You don't have to be artistic and brilliant to score a high on this quality. Give yourself a high if you offer ideas and suggestions. If you're brainstorming or there's a problem to be solved, that you engage in stimulating thinking in a group by participating, not holding back. And also, well, you could give yourself a low here if you come into brainstorming with the answer, quote unquote, but that's not really brainstorming then. Get your rating down for creative. And we'll go on to quality number 7. Responsible and productive. Give yourself a high if you have high ethical standards, and especially that you know and operate within the IEEE Code of Ethics. You understand NDAs and you operate within them. You're willing to say no when an ethical boundary is crossed. Give yourself a high if you produce on a regular basis high quality work and you do it efficiently. You follow through on what you say you'll do, when you say you'll do it. You wrap stuff up. You don't leave things hanging. Get your rating down for number 7. And now we're going to go on to one of my favorite topics, quality number 8, constructive communicator. Here we go. Give yourself a high if you consistently think before you speak. Now, that's something that a lot of human beings are not very good at. We just open our mouth and let fly whatever wants to come out. But if you're giving yourself a high, what that means is instead you think first and then you go for a good two-way dialogue rather than cutting people off. You show that you're willing to listen to another point of view. And then you listen for understanding, not ammunition. Also, you pay attention to how clients prefer to communicate. And I'll bet you if I took a poll here, I would find out that your clients across the board, some prefer telephone, some prefer texting, some prefer email, some prefer live meetings. So you give yourself a high if you find out how they like to communicate and then you meet them there, rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach. Give yourself a high if you're responsive, returning phone calls and emails timely. And if you don't know an answer or you can't make a commitment, you at least tell the person that, and then you set a time for getting back to them with some kind of an answer. Give yourself a high if your tone of voice is respectful and you avoid words like sorry and policy and unfortunately. Here's my favorite, you guys. Sorry, but unfortunately, I can't do that. It's policy. So what I find is that is one of the least helpful things that I can tell someone. All right. Yeah, so there's constructive communicator in a nutshell. Give yourself your rating. And we'll go on to quality number 9. Problem solver, that's pretty self-explanatory, but let me give you a few points here and you can get your rating down. Give yourself a high if you focus on solving, not blaming. Sometimes we're well taught, the problem comes up, oh, we got to find somebody to pin this on. So give yourself a high if you avoid that and instead you put the focus on moving forward, especially if you're running a meeting where this happens. You'd give yourself a high if you stop people from blaming each other and you start them on figuring out what is the problem and now how are we going to solve it. So back to that methodical, systematic problem solving. Give yourself a high if you don't get stuck in the past, and that when you do think about the future and solving something, you actually project the outcomes of this or that solution, unlike the government, which seems to pass laws at times without looking at how they'll actually work. You're giving yourself a high if you think through that before you put something into place. And let's go to the last, number 10, service-oriented. Give yourself a high if you take clients' needs into consideration, not just yours. I know as an independent consultant, sometimes that's a fine line to walk because you don't want to sacrifice yourself to your own detriment and the detriment of your business, but you don't want to overbalance on the other side either. So give yourself a high if you've found a good combination of taking care of your own needs and taking care of your clients' needs. Give yourself a high if you show in your actions that you're more than just a technical professional with expertise. You're also a professional business owner who makes client relations a priority. And finally, you treat your clients the right way, which is a little bit different than the client is always right. All right, so get your rating down. And what I'd like to see here, if a few of you want to type into your chat box, I'd like to hear from a few what qualities really, what was the one quality that stood out as your biggest strength or your greatest area needing work? Let's just see a little bit of input here. Now, Helen, will I be able to see these, or will it only be you viewing them? All right. Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we've got, let's see, number 3. Now, I can't tell if this is a strength or an area of work, but it looks like flexible is coming up, team player, and creative. And then we've got a problem solver. Problem solver is a strength, yeah. Oh, and thank you, Robert, for the guidance on. Let's see, if you send your chat to the host and presenter folks, then I'll be able to see all the input too. Let's see if anybody else. Okay. Oh, there we go. So it looks like one person is looking to work at the areas of flexibility, team player, and creativity. So good to know. Oh, we've got another one who's looking to work at constructive communicator. Well, you have come to the right place because that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this webinar is constructive communication. All right, excellent. Thank you, folks, for the input. Now, here's the thing. What I want you to do with this self-assessment is keep it visible somewhere. For those of you who shared what you want to work on, those are the areas to go find some resources. You'll get some today, and there's a lot more out there. So decide what you want to put your focus on and make that your intention for the new year. All right. So where we're going to head now is this business of, oh, here's another one. A couple more inputs coming in here. Working at the customer being wrong. Oh, that is, yes, that is an important area. Tips on problem solving for one who tends to mull things over. All right. Okay, well, let us go forward here and see what kind of skills I can offer you today. And then at the end of the webinar, I'm also going to tell you about a coaching offer that I can extend to you. And anybody who would like one-on-one coaching in these areas, we can talk about that. All right. Let's start with the basics, folks. Communication. This may seem like a no-brainer, but sometimes we forget ourselves. When communication works well, you have one person, the speaker, sending a message to the receiver or the listener. They express themselves in whatever way they do. The receiver takes that message in, processes it. This can happen very quickly, and then in some way responds to show. Responds to.
Christine, can you stop for a moment?
Yeah.
I'm going to mute everyone again, and Christine, press *6 to unmute your phone.
Okay. Okay, so I think I'm back on. Helen, will you send me a quick note if you can hear me? Excellent. All right. Okay. Yeah, thanks. All right, everybody, thank you for your patience with the webinar miscellaneous. Okay, so communication doesn't always flow back and forth in this way with a speaker sending a message, a receiver catching it, and then in some way acknowledging what that message was. When it does work that way, it's a nice flow back and forth between the two people changing roles. Instead, what happens is I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk. So we're both speakers. We're not stopping to listen to each other, or worse, sometimes worse, one person will just drop out of the communication altogether, in some way showing I'm not listening or even walking away. Well, in these cases, no one is actually listening. So we're going to start with the listening side of communication. And what you see here on this slide are the 3 common levels of listening. A lot of us, well, I would say few of us have been trained in how to listen. We do it, we hear people, and sometimes we tend to do it in less effective ways than others. So actually, you'll see the first 2 levels of passive and selective. Those are the most common, but the least effective ways of going about it. Passive listening, you can probably guess, is not effective because there's little participation from the listener. I was taught very well to sit quietly, nod, and smile. And that's it. So I may look polite, but you as the speaker would have no idea if I understand your message. So it's not very effective. If you have a degree, you sat in a certain number of lectures, and that's all you really could do was just sit and listen. Or you might have even been told by teachers to shut up and listen. So that's where this passive level comes from. Selective listening, if you have teenagers, you know all about selective listening. It's basically, I hear what I want to hear. So if you're saying something that I agree with or I want to hear about, then I'll perk up, I'll pay attention, I might ask a few questions, I'll participate. But as soon as you start saying something I don't want to hear, I go reactive on you, talking over you or arguing. Or maybe I just do something semi-rude, like look at my watch or start filing my nails. So I'm still sitting there, but I'm sending this judgmental message, I disagree with what you're saying. or maybe I just roll my eyes, one of the most destructive things that people can do. So passive and selective, very common, not effective. The level of listening that I want to talk to you about today is the third level, active listening, where I do two things. I really pay attention to what the speaker is saying without worrying about whether I agree with them or not. So I might ask a few questions to gain a depth of information about the person's message. I don't ask questions to make my point as a listener, but I just want to find out, what do you really mean? And as soon as I think I know what you really mean, then I check understanding to confirm it. I'm going to take you to the goal of all of this. And this can be the difficult thing. How do I take myself out of my own head and off of my own feelings about your message and really understand it from your point of view? If you have, I'll give you a resource here. If you have not read Getting to Yes, the Harvard Negotiating Project book, William Ury et al., fabulous resource on this topic. Basically what they say is, if we could just stop long enough to understand what the other person means, then the world would be a better place. So that's the Cliff Notes version of that. So here's the thing. That can be difficult to listen when you don't agree, but that's the key. Listen for understanding first. Check it out. Let the other person come back with, yes, that's what I meant, or no, you didn't get my meaning, and then you could go forward from there. Who here, let's see, just a quick show of hands, who here would really like to be heard that way? Nice, there's a big list coming up. Oh, yeah, okay, so I'm hearing, yes, I'd like to be heard that way, and yes, I also want to listen that way, so great, you guys have come to the right place. Let's keep going. Thanks for your participation, folks. So I want to give you some do's and don'ts here in this area of good listening. Eye contact, there's the master list. There are a few tips about eye contact. Now I have to tell you guys what I think is kind of an amusing story that I did. I realized that I was not making eye contact with people. And I go to the grocery store or wherever I go on a regular basis, and I come into contact with all these people, and then I realized that I didn't even know who I had been dealing with because I wasn't making eye contact. So I decided I was really going to work hard on that. And then I took a workshop where they said the left eye is the window of the soul. Looking back on that, it seems kind of hilarious to me. But I decided that I would really pay attention to everyone's left eye and give good eye contact. I was having a conversation with a client, and we were talking about this topic, and he said, yeah, you have really good eye contact. Sometimes it's kind of scary. So you don't want to go scary on them. Do have some kind of eye contact. Now, sometimes people, due to cultural or upbringing issues, don't do well with eye contact. They don't like eye contact, so you're not going to force people to do it, but so you do have to pay attention to other people's body language. All right, so there's a few tips on eye contact. Now, in terms of live meetings, definitely do that first tip. What I see happening instead is a person facing their computer, typing on a keyboard, or they have their smartphone in their hand, and they're not facing the speaker. They're not paying attention to the speaker, although they might say, I'm listening, I'm listening. So here's my definition of multitasking. It's the way to screw up more than one thing at a time. Put the phone down. Pay attention to the person. And here's the deal. Even if you're on the phone with somebody, that other person probably can tell if you are doing something else. It's amazing. I do a lot of coaching by phone, and people can tell if I've gotten up and walked into another room. So if you want to get the message right the first time, pay attention. Work hard to show the other person that you're with them. All right, so the next area, your face tells a lot. And even if you're on the phone, eye rolling and boredom leak out your lips. Your tone says a lot. Listeners do speak. So when we get to the speaking side, I'm going to ask you, listen for the, or when you're on the speaking side, your tone conveys a lot. And when you're listening, you're also listening for the speaker's tone because there's meaning there. So tone is important all over the place. Listeners do talk. They just don't talk as much as speakers. So watch your own tone, especially if you disagree with someone. There's a tool called a door opener. Door openers are those little words that you say to let the other person know that you're tracking, like, oh, or wow, really, okay, like that. So I could take a nice, friendly little door opener and turn it into a door closer with a tone of voice. Right. Wow. Okay. So I really want to be aware of how I sound. And let's get to this really important piece here about responding. So listeners do talk, and this is the acknowledging part. The speaker says their message. You think that you've got their message, you understand it, and you want to send it back in your own words in about one sentence if you can do it. And you're going to make it a question because you're checking understanding. You're not declaring it or telling the person what they should be meaning. So what you want to avoid are those last 3 points. I understand, but you need to understand what I'm saying. Yeah, that's not going to help. Or I'm sorry, or even worse, sorry. Sorry you feel that way. So none of those are showing that empathy and understanding of the person's message. Better would be to say, for example, so it sounds like you're disappointed because the project was canceled? Is that right? Or if I'm getting you right, what you're wanting is speed over quality. Is that what you mean? So the speaker gives you a paragraph or 20, and you extract out of there the essence of their message and feed it back in one sentence. Now the speaker can come back with yes, not quite, or something along those lines. Once you've shown understanding of the speaker's message, now you get to decide, and the speaker will help you decide, do you want to stay as listener? Do you want to do some problem solving, or is it your turn to be the speaker? So let's assume it's now your turn to be the speaker. Back to the basics. Now you're the sender. Some people do it skillfully, some not so much. Now, a lot of us might have taken speech classes in school, but very few people have received much education and training in how to communicate messages, especially when they're difficult messages. So you see the 4 common ways that people express themselves. And I want to do a little demonstration that will illustrate these 4 ways. I can hear someone typing back there, which is a little bit distracting. If you could mute yourself. All right, so let's say that I am the consultant in the scenario, and I'm going to be talking with an employee of the firm that I'm going to be doing a job for. And the client has made me responsible for directing this employee on a particular project that has not been going well. What you will hear are the 4 common ways that people communicate with me as the consultant talking to this employee. Then at the end, I'm going to ask you to do the chat thing again to say which level of expression you found most favorable. So here we go. We're going to take it from the top of the list. I'm going to talk to the employee. All right, now it's clear to me that you guys have been screwing this project up, and now I have to clean up the mess. So you just need to shut up and listen and don't question anything. Just do what you're told. And now I'll go on to the second method. I know this is, well, gosh, I just don't know what to say. I know you've been here a long time, and I'm kind of the new guy. I don't even actually work here. Well, they told me I'm supposed to be running this now. I hope that's okay with you. I wonder what do you think we should do? And then we'll go on to the third one. What the hell have you guys been doing around here? I heard this was some crack engineering team. Just kidding, just kidding. Seriously, though, it's a good thing the experts are here now. Jeez. Anyway, let's see if there's anything useful left in this damage you've done. And then we'll go on to the last one. I really appreciate you meeting with me this morning. What I'd like to accomplish in this conversation is a couple of things. I want to understand your view of the project today, what's working, what isn't. And let's get a description of the problem. Then we'll talk about possible root causes. If we have time in the meeting, we can look at some options for fixing the problems and get a plan going. Most important, I think, is that we get a good understanding of what's happening and get going on a plan. How does that sound? All right, so those are your four. All exaggerations except last. Well, so I'm getting some feedback here that the first three sounded exaggerated, and I don't have to, these aren't actual quotes from other people, but I never have to make this stuff up. I hear these kinds of things, especially that non-assertive, all the time. I'm hearing assertive is the best. We hope they were exaggerated. Okay, so that last one, assertive, here's the problem with assertive that I have found in my practice and what my clients have told me over time. It's harder than the other kinds. I really have to think about what I'm saying before I say it. And a lot of us were taught to joke around. That's that passive aggressive. And I hear a lot of jokey stuff going on that can be hurtful and annoying. In terms of the aggressive approach, I've heard people slap on tables and call people names, right? So of the four, assertive is the best way to go. All right. So here's the goal of assertive speaking. Now, the thing about these three bullet points is that a lot of people are really good at the first two. I barf up the first thing that comes to mind, and I don't stop to be constructive. So that's the part that's missed. Now, the note about not sugarcoating it, this is not about only saying the happy, crappy news. It's about saying the true message, but in the most helpful way possible. So I want to give you some tips on how to do that. So as I was going through the 10 qualities, one of them had to do with, well, the first one had to do with the can-do. So here's the thing about tip number one. I could say, no, I can't do that. I'm in a webinar today, but that's not very helpful to the person. So better would be to say, what I can do is call you this afternoon. I'm in a webinar this morning. On the will-do side, I hear people often saying, well, I'll try to do that. I'll try to have that by Friday. But the person who needs something, that's not going to build very much confidence. Not going to build very much confidence if I say, maybe I can do that or I'll try to do that. So better is to say, here's what I will do, and then follow through. And if it turns out I can't do that after I've made the commitment, then I need to tell them and then set a new date. So tip number two, how I talk about problems has everything to do with how willing people will be to work with me to solve them. So instead of who screwed up or how could you do that or this is a mess and we need to, what the hell's going on here? I want to be able to say things like, let's look at this. What's actually happening? What's the problem for you from your viewpoint? I have some ideas. What ideas do you have? Let's look at the options. So taking that language from the focusing on the past and turning it toward let's get out of the blame game and figure out what to do next. That's the language of solutions. Tip number three. In essence, tip number three says less is more. I don't need to hear
From
a
2
long.
to 3.
Say again. On tip number 3 on being direct and concise. What's not going to be helpful is for me to read a long story or hear a long story about why somebody didn't do something, especially because they were so busy. So my recommendation to everybody is take out of your language, I'm sorry I couldn't do that, I was too busy. Who isn't busy? And then tip number 4, I'll bet I could take a poll on acronyms, and I bet you guys could give me some fabulous acronyms. If you speak acronym, then do that with each other because that can be a real time saver. But with an audience that doesn't speak that language, that can be very off-putting, and then it's going to be hard for the person to really hear your message. And I'll give you a quick example. I was at the grocery store, and as I was checking out, the clerk said, "Oh, the Catalina wants you to have this." And I'm thinking, what? I didn't buy any Catalina dressing. That was the first thought that came to mind. I said, I don't know what you mean. She says, well, here, no, the Catalina wants you to have these coupons. I said, I do not know what you mean. And she said, the machine, the Catalina machine, it spits out the coupons. So she's talking to me in language that I don't understand. Only she does. So it wasn't helpful. So this connects to the tip of think before you speak. And let's go with the nonverbal tips. We talked about eye contact already. When you're the speaker, eye contact engages your audience. You want them to stay with you. Your tone of voice. Also, if you sound arrogant, or on the other side of it, you sound wishy-washy, your audience may question if you are the person they should be listening to. Now, I would invite everyone on this call to do tip number 3. And compare for yourself, if you were slouching or you had your feet up on the desk, what have you, compare for yourself how you feel now, and especially if you're on a webinar. I can tell you, I am doing this tip right now. I'm leaning forward slightly, I'm up at my desk, and I can see my computer rather than laying on the floor or having my feet up. Tip number 4, you want to avoid mumbling or slurring so that your audience can understand what you're saying, whether your audience is 1 person or 1,000. And then finally, back to tone. Have a sincere one rather than a frustrated, whining, or venting tone. And it can be easy to slip into whining without realizing it. So if you wonder if that happens with you, get some feedback from somebody who will give you the straight answer on that. You want to get the right kind of attention if you're talking about a problem. You don't want to get negative attention by people thinking that you're a whiner. All right, and as we begin to wrap up here and then open it up for questions, I wanted to give you a few tips that I know it's not rocket science, but email is used more and more and often misused more and more. So I wanted to offer you these tips. What's been very helpful to me is to think about why I'm writing to somebody and what I want them to do as they are reading my email. The same thing in presentations. My presentation is going to be very different if I'm selling somebody something or if I'm informing them. So I want to let them know up front, here's why I'm communicating to you. So do that in your emails too. And everybody does have different needs. Some people do like all the detail before the headline. Some people like the headline before the detail. To be on the safe side, you can provide both, but I recommend providing the bulk of the detail as an option for somebody to read rather than making them read through it until the end and then finding out, oh, duh. Now, as far as this last one, regarding conflict is best resolved live, whether on the telephone or in person. I've done the field work. You can try to resolve a conflict by email, but it just doesn't work. Usually people find that after going back and forth a few times, they still have to have a phone call or a live meeting. So save yourself the time and just go directly to the person as soon as you notice it. And I was thinking that you probably go to a lot of meetings or run meetings or both, and so I wanted to give you some tips on that. Now, what kills me is how often people go to meetings without really knowing why or knowing what they're supposed to be prepared with. And I realize a lot of people who run meetings have informational meetings, or you go around the circle and everybody talks about what they're working on. A really good meeting has a purpose that relates to working on something. And so then I would need to come prepared because I'm a full participant in the meeting. So to the degree that you can, if you're attending, find out what the meeting is about and what you're supposed to be contributing to it. And if you're running a meeting, certainly you can have the ultimate control over letting people know why you're doing it, what the outcome should be, and how they should prepare themselves. Whether you're the leader or not, use the communication tips of summarizing, clarifying, and don't leave things hanging. That a lot of people complain. We have these meetings that go on forever and then nothing actually happens. So you can change that. As far as the multitasking goes, if you find yourself sending email or working your smartphone under the table during a meeting, I would ask you a question: why am I in this meeting? And especially if you're a leader, see that last tip. You want to model the behaviors you want to see from others. And if you're working your smartphone under the table, that sends the message to other people that you don't really have to be plugged in until your name is called. All right, and last, I know that the telephone is becoming, it's lower on the list of priorities for communicating, but a lot of people still use it. So here are a few tips to make the most of it. If your office is in your home, if you live alone, you have ultimate control over who answers that phone and what your outgoing message is. But if you live with other people, please, please, please make sure that your phone is answered professionally, no matter what time of day. Also, your outgoing message. I've seen email addresses and outgoing messages that tell me that this person is not paying attention to how they look to the outside world. So my email address should not be christinky@yahoo.com. Even if I thought that was cute, my clients aren't. So I have cwsilver@silverbusinesssolutions.com, and that is also my website. And then my voicemail outgoing message reflects that. Thank you for calling Silver Business Solutions. This is Christine, like that. When you are calling other people, never assume that you're going to be able to leave a voicemail. They might actually pick up the phone, so you want to prepare yourself a little bit before you make your phone call. Know why you're calling, and then if you do leave a voicemail, be prepared to leave a brief one. And always practice active listening, especially on the phone. It's so helpful to summarize what you think you've just heard so that you don't walk away with a misunderstanding. So you get to decide how you want your stakeholders to view you. The tips that I've shared with you today are simple to apply. What's not so simple is actually doing it. And some or all of you may have had the thought along the line, oh, this is so simple, or this is so such a no-brainer, or we know this stuff. And yes, we do, and sometimes we don't do it. So to just continue to assess myself, how am I coming across, how do I want to come across, where's the gap, and what do I need to do to fill up that gap so that I am operating the way I want to operate to the level of professionalism I want to be seen in the world. You keep your focus there as well as on the expertise that you bring, you're going to be a successful professional consultant. All right, and so that concludes the presentation, and I see some questions have already come up, so let me scroll back here and see what's already come, and then any other questions, please type them in. Now, I don't know if this was specifically a question, but I see a challenge for consultants, communicating bad news. And what I would say to that is avoid the words that I mentioned earlier, like sorry, unfortunately, you don't want to hear this, this is really bad, that kind of stuff. All of those preambles tell the listener, stop listening, because I'm about to tell you something you don't want to hear. Your challenge is communicate objectively, briefly, and in the best way possible, and let the listener decide if they think it's bad news. I had to do this yesterday, and I was uncomfortable about it, and it was kind of a tense situation. But I just decided to practice my own tools, and I just said, here's the situation. We're ending this agreement, and then I stopped talking, and I waited for the other person to ask for the additional information they wanted, rather than rambling my way through a difficult message. Let's see.
Christine, there's another question. What do you do if the person you are talking to doesn't understand or take you seriously or want to follow your leadership?
Mm-hmm. Say the first part of the question again, Helen, please.
What do you do if the person you are talking to doesn't understand or take you seriously or want to follow your leadership?
All right. Well, especially the part about not taking you seriously. That can be a big challenge, because a person could get triggered by that. So what the assertive approach says is, if I want to say my message to the other person and I want to gauge their reaction, if they laugh it off or they roll their eyes, what you can do as the speaker is to call that. I notice that you're rolling your eyes. It seems like you don't agree with my message. Is that right? So you're speaking and then actually doing active listening at the same time. Try to get that other person engaged. If they don't understand your message and they say, I don't understand, then you can just rephrase. Or if they look at you blankly, again, you can paraphrase what you think you're seeing from the other person. It looks like my message isn't clear. Is that right? It looks like I could perhaps need to say this another way. Is that what you're looking for? Now, if they don't want to follow your leadership, that's a pretty big topic right there. I would invite that person to contact me separately to talk about that a little bit more. Speaker, should we set up checkpoints and see if the audience is listening? Okay, so I see a question here about, as a speaker, should we set up checkpoints to see that an audience is listening? Well, that's a fabulous question. I knew that you guys were listening because occasionally I asked you to raise your hand or type in some kind of a response, which you did quickly. So you can do that on a conference call. If you have a live audience or you're live one-on-one, the way that you know is to stop occasionally and ask the listener a question. You can ask, like you say you deliver a difficult message, you want to stop, and then you can say, well, what are your thoughts on this? And get them participating. That's how you know people are paying attention. Is there a place to get a download of these slides? Helen, will the slides be on the website after today concludes?
Yes, they will be posted to our website, IEEE-USA.org/careers/webinars within a few days. So visit our website and the download will be there.
Okay, very good. Okay, are there any other questions, folks? We still have a few minutes.
Okay, on behalf of IEEE USA, Christine, I want to thank you for your presentation and also thank attendees for participating.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And Helen, if I could just have one more moment, I wanted to tell folks about the coaching. I do one-on-one coaching in the areas of leadership and communication, team building, and conflict resolution. And I'm offering 4 coaching sessions, 4 one-hour coaching sessions for $500. So if you'd like to talk about that, find out more about it, or commit to it, then please contact me and we'll take it from there. And I really appreciate your kind attention today, and get out there and use these tips.
Okay, we're going to end the webinar now.
All right, thanks, Helen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.